What up, and welcome back to LSU Live. I'm your host, Lewis Johnson, and we got a very special guest I want to welcome on to the show tonight. For those who don't know, I got Lucas Hill. He covers South Carolina for the Voice of College Football. Louisiana native, Southeastern alum. Somehow he ended up over on the dark side to cover South Carolina. But look, I'm going to be honest with y'all. I'm big on football. Love all the sports. Lucas does it all. Football, basketball, baseball, whatever. Welcome to the show, man, and thanks for coming on.
Lou, appreciate you having me, man. Again, thank you for hopping on with me on Monday, and let's get after it, man. I'm excited.
Yeah, no problem, man. Had a great time. Hopefully you'll have a good time over here with the Tigers. But looking at both programs, man, looks like you kind of mirror each other in a lot of ways. But you came in with big name quarterbacks, first team All SEC, second team All SEC, high hopes, high aspirations. And I'll give you my assessment of South Carolina, or my projection for South Carolina coming into the year. I thought they'd take a small step back on defense, not a big one, still a good defense. But I thought that Sellers would elevate this game and it would kind of make up for the difference. And you still be looking at a top 10 team in that range. So you start off 3-2, not exactly terrible. The way you look at that Vandy loss didn't look so great, but just being objective and taking the fanhood out of it, South Carolina actually outgained Vandy. You just turnovers, and of course the Sellers injury made it look bad. So how is the local fan base looking at their program right now? What's the temperature around South Carolina?
Well, Lou, I mean, I talk with a lot of South Carolina fans in the preseason, and they firmly believe that this could be a 10-2 team and could make the college football playoff. Now you're sitting going into their first game of October. You're sitting at 3-2. Your offensive line has not lived up to expectations. Offense has been inconsistent at best. And really, you've only averaged, when you look at offensively, the most points that you've had in a game. If you take away all the defensive and special teams touchdowns, you've had 21 points in a game. That's not going to get you much in the SEC, especially now that the competition is ramping up. But now people are hyped up because it's what they call Cocktober. And this is around the time of the month where you look at the rest of the slate. You play LSU this week. You play Oklahoma next week. You get Alabama, and you play Ole Miss. It's a rough stretch. Let's just be real with each other. And it's not going to get easy from here on out for South Carolina. You do expect, though, to see some sort of improvement on the offensive side of the ball. Fans are pissed off, man. I mean, they rightfully should be. You had a Heisman Trophy a hopeful in Lenore Sellers, and he's being held back because of a lackluster offensive line that before that Kentucky game, Lou, 6 out of the 8 halves of football that you played, you've had a different look on the offensive line. You have to develop some sort of consistency in this game, especially going up against an LSU defense that, like we talked about on Monday, probably the best that we've seen since Dave Aranda was there. So a lot of frustration, a lot of what-ifs around that fan base, but things are starting to look up after the bye week. We've heard from team practice this week that morale is very high compared to what it's been the last couple of weeks. They said this is the highest that it's been all season long, and you'd hope the results would carry over to this Saturday.
Yeah, man, hopefully so. But speaking from an LSU perspective, hopefully not this week. Again, you talk about the offensive line, we continue to stay on this mirror images theme here. A lot of different combinations for South Carolina, a lot of different combinations for LSU. Now, some of that is due to injury, and I think that some of it might even work to LSU's advantage. Not that you want anybody to get hurt. We'll get into that LSU offense later on, but I want to read out some stats to you that kind of shocked me when I first looked at it. I've watched a couple of South Carolina games, haven't kept up with it like game by game. So we're going to look at a few stats, and these are Lenore Sellers' rushing numbers, and we know the kind of dynamic athlete that Sellers can be. Virginia Tech, 13 rushes, 25 yards. And, of course, these numbers are going to have sack yardage in there, so take it for what it's worth. Vanderbilt, 3 rushes for -3 yards. Of course, he gets hurt. Missouri, 10 rushes for 28 yards. And finally, against Kentucky, you get a Sellers that looks more like Sellers, and it's 14 rushes for 81 yards. So, in your opinion, what took so long to get Sellers going on the ground?
I think it's been play calling, to be honest with you. Mike Shula has been around some of the best quarterbacks in his time as an offensive play caller. He was with Cam Newton for 6 years, and he was there when his MVP season. So you'd think, as a South Carolina fan, looking at a guy like Lenore Sellers, whom a lot of people have compared to Cam Newton going into this year's draft, you would think the same thing would occur, but that just hasn't happened, which is very frustrating as a South Carolina fan, because you see the dynamic ability of Lenore and the dual threat capability and what he could possess over the next couple of years as a quarterback. And it's just been so frustrating to see. Obviously, you got to count into the offensive line play, but Kentucky was the first game where you really started to see Lenore get out of his shell. I feel like he was hesitant at times because of the play calling that was expected of him. I feel like Mike Shula tried to make him into a pocket passer, and it's something that he really isn't going to be at the next level, and that's not what he's expected to be at the next level. You're expecting him to do what he's done all of last year, create those designed runs for him, get those pin and pulls that you get from that offensive line. When you run towards the perimeter offensively for South Carolina, you generate big plays. When you run draws or when you run misdirections behind the guards, which have been a weak point for this South Carolina offense, you're not really generating anything. And that's what has really, really been the big difference at the end of the day for South Carolina's offense. But to your point, Lou, it's just been such a weird season, knowing what offensively you have and the playmakers that you have. And what we were told in the preseason, we were told, okay, offensive line took a step forward this year compared to last year. Well, obviously that's not the case. Lenore Sellers has gotten sacked, I believe, 14 or 15 times this season, and we're only 5 weeks in towards South Carolina season. So you have to win the turnip. You have to win the line of scrimmage this upcoming week. So I'm sure we'll talk about that more, but it's been the hesitancy of Mike Shula at the end of the day, which is why he's not running the football as much. Hopefully we get to see more of this weekend from what you saw 2 weeks ago in Kentucky.
Yeah, well, I think we got two head coaches with Beamer and Kelly that are both getting pretty frustrated with their OCs right now. I know Kelly's been on record more than once talking about how he wants to be more balanced. He wants to run the ball. They have to be more physical. And that was a point of emphasis over this bye week. Again, with South Carolina, it's just hard to believe. When you look at them, I watch LSU every week, and I'm like, it's hard to imagine a team being worse at running the ball than LSU. And then you look at the SEC stats, and South Carolina is behind LSU with a quarterback like Sellers. You go back to the play calling, I think that's the exact opposite of what you want to do with a guy like Sellers. You got a guy that's a true game breaker. To even put him in the same breath with Cam Newton says a lot about the type of athlete he is. And quarterback. Yeah, do you want him to develop from the pocket? Yeah, of course you do. But don't make him a pocket passer and take away what makes him special. Sellers in the open field, just ask Clemson. I mean, he's a difference maker. So that is nuts. You talked about those weapons. And I think an underrated weapon for South Carolina last year was the tight end, Josh Simon. And whenever he kind of got in trouble, Simon was somewhat of a safety blanket for him.
Right.
You could count on him. Sure-handed guy. He wasn't a Pitts from Florida who was super explosive, but he was dependable. Does he have anybody like that right now that he can kind of count on when he's in a bind? I know he's taking a lot of sacks. Does he have that safety blanket on offense?
Well, you obviously talked about the tight end room. One of those things would be Dre Jacobs, who's been your number one receiver all year. Deep play threat who can run down the field vertically and can create big plays when it's all said and done. But I think to your point, Lou, about the X factor on this team, it's got to be your tight end room, in my opinion. And it's all three tight ends. I know South Carolina just had one that entered the transfer portal, Michael Smith, who had a promising freshman year, 10 catches for 109 yards. He enters the portal because he just can't see the field. There's 3 other running tight ends that are in front of him that are just being honest with you, that are so much better than what they have right now. When you talk about guys like Jordan Dingle, who you can get out the backfield and work up the field. Brady Hunt, who's kind of done the same thing. But in my opinion, your do-it-all playmaker who's not really seeing the football much is Mo Brown, number 44. Active on special teams, very, very high intensity. When you see him, he's got that cowboy collar like they used to have in the 90s. So you want to talk about old school, bring the juice type of guy. Go look at a guy with a cowboy collar and with the number 44 as a tight end. That's about as old school as you can get. But Mo Brown can make plays out the backfield if he can get him in space. Usually the first 3 games of the season, South Carolina went straight to Mo Brown on the very first play, and he brought the juice. I mean, you were getting 8, 9, 10 yards a catch from him, but you just went away from him when you got to the other side of the 50. So I would like for South Carolina to get this tight end room involved a lot more than it has been lately. Make sure you get them on little quick outs, little 2-yard out routes. Let them work the sidelines. Especially if they're playing zone, you can get 4 or 5 yards, set yourself up with second and medium instead of putting yourself behind the sticks.
Use the whole field.
Yes,
use the whole field. I mean, it sounds like it's safe to say that there's been a kind of underutilization of some weapons on South Carolina's team, and it's definitely the case for LSU.